Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Unpaid Interns. It is Friday, October 9th. Austin Render here, joined by Fox Sports Indiana and the Indiana Pacers sideline reporter Jeremiah Johnson. So glad that he could join us here today. Jeremiah, how are you?
Doing great, Austin. Glad I could join the show, and I'm sure, like many of your guests, I was once an unpaid intern, so I feel like I fit right in.
Perfect. Well, then you're the ideal guest that we're looking for here. I think the last time we talked back in April, you were doing long bike rides and cleaning out the basement. What was the pandemic like for you with a couple months off of pro basketball?
It was really odd because I felt like the team was kind of ramping up in March to a point where they were going to be gelling at just the right time. They were going to be healthy, and they were going to really be in position to make a strong push for home court advantage in the playoffs. And then everything abruptly stopped. And, April and May and June, so much uncertainty. And really, I think probably most people watching this would say maybe it was a little bit of a dark time just because you didn't know not just in the world what was going to happen, but I didn't know what was going to happen with the season and with my job. And once the news kind of started getting out that they had a bubble plan and they were going to resume, it was that light at the end of the tunnel where you had something to look forward to. And so I don't want to relive April, May, June again. I was glad we could get back on the court in August, and now I'm just kind of in my second off season. And it's a little odd in October to not be going to practice and not be thinking about the start of a new season, but I do have, good optimism that it'll be here eventually.
Yeah, we won't make you go through those months again. None of us want to do that by any
Uh,
means. But let's start by going back to the season though, like the actual games part of it. What was your role during the bubble? I know obviously normally you're on the sidelines, you're doing the interviews. What did your role look like there during the bubble?
well, one of the good things about my job with the Pacers that's a little bit different than a lot of the teams around the league is that I'm not just a sideline reporter, but I do host the pregame show and the postgame show. And so, to where some teams, if you are just a sideline reporter, your options and abilities to kind of do your job were a little bit limited. But I still had a lot of responsibilities with the pregame. We still hosted a show that I sat on the Fox Loft during the pregame show and the postgame show and came on at halftime. During the game is where the challenges were a little bit different in that, I had to kind of feel out the game a little bit. And also we had a new producer that joined us in August. So we were really kind of getting to know each other a little bit. And we had to, I feel like what's the best way a sideline reporter can be a part of the broadcast, even though you're not, as you said, on the sidelines. And in a normal game, when I'm on location, I feel like about half of what I contribute to a broadcast is what I see firsthand, and the other half is maybe through conversations that I have before games. And so I'm not seeing anything any different than anyone else during a game. So I didn't have those huddle observations or things like that. And I really didn't have access to as many random conversations with coaches or players outside of the media availability via Zoom. So I had to figure out what was a good way to, interject myself into the broadcast. And I think I found a good balance. I didn't want to be too overbearing during the game, but there was still, some stories that I could share. And as many of you know, sponsorship is such a big part of a game broadcast. And so I was assigned some different things to do during the game that fulfilled sponsor obligations. So once we got in a little bit of a rhythm, I felt like that if you were watching at home, maybe you didn't know that we weren't at the games. I didn't love not being there, but I did think that we did as good as we could under the circumstances.
That was going to be my follow-up question. I mean, how difficult was it for you as somebody who loves the atmosphere, loves being there? How difficult was it to just have to be sitting in Bankers Life Fieldhouse, not at the game, not with the fans? I'm sure it felt really weird.
It was odd, but I will say that so much of the intensity that I feel during a game, even when I'm there, it comes from hearing Chris and Quinn and their enthusiasm. And so I still was connected to IFB, and I was still kind of getting their natural enthusiasm. And for instance, during the seeding games, we won't maybe talk about the playoffs as much because they weren't as exciting from a Pacers perspective, but 6-2 in the seeding games, and TJ Warren kind of turned into a star in front of our eyes. And there were some moments there where I got as excited sitting in the Fox Loft with two people beside me as I did in a 18,000 seat arena. But it was hard. And, I think to bring the playoffs back up again, that was probably the worst part, because in a normal season, you work 82 games a year, and everything you do is to kind of get to those playoff games. And we try to build our broadcast up to where, opening night maybe is our biggest night because we have all off season to prepare for it. But maybe the second biggest night for us is the first playoff game that we get to broadcast, because we don't have as much of a lead up to prepare for it, but we know the audience is maybe going to be as big that night as any, and the games are more important than any. And so driving to Bankers Life Fieldhouse to broadcast a playoff game where there was no game there and there were no fans there and there was no energy in the building, that was a little bit of a letdown, and something that, again, I hope we don't have to do again. But I am proud of the NBA for what they have been able to put on under the circumstances.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to the NBA's great work here in a moment. I do want to talk you, Chris, and Quinn. How did that kind of work? I know you detailed it a little bit earlier, but kind of how was that relationship? How did the broadcast go? And what were some of the difficulties you guys faced not being able to be on location?
Well, the odd thing is, for us, a normal day on the road, let's say, we would all go to shoot around if there was a shoot around. So we would at least see each other, maybe in the hotel, on the bus, and, not necessarily sit by each other and talk during shoot around. But if there was anything we wanted to share in the morning, we would do that. And then we would all get together with the producers and some of the behind the scenes staff for a dinner meeting, let's say for a 7:00 game at 4:45. And that's an important time where we would all, share ideas. Maybe I could relay something that I had heard. The producers would go over graphics and things that we were going to be able to put into the broadcast. And we just didn't have any of those opportunities. There were some games where Bankers Life Fieldhouse is under construction. So not only did we have to maintain social distancing, but we also had to wear hard helmets and vests when we were walking around the building. So to be perfectly honest, there were some games that I never actually saw Chris or Quinn, because they were downstairs in the television studio calling their game off of monitors, and I was basically in the Fox loft. And then my pregame, postgame show analyst, Eddie Gill, he was also joining me via a 2-box, and he was in the studio in like Quinn's chair during the pregame show. Then he would go to another room in the studio where he and Mark Boyle were calling the game for radio, also off of our video feeds. So I honestly sometimes never saw Chris or Quinn or even Eddie except through the television until maybe they were leaving and I was kind of wrapping up and, hey, good job tonight. So what helped is that we've worked together so much. I think if, I mentioned having a new producer was maybe the biggest challenge for us, because he didn't necessarily know, the way we do things and some of our style, but specifically with Chris and Quinn and Eddie on the pre and the post game show, and our pregame producer, post game producer, Ken Southland, we've been working together for a number of years. So that continuity and chemistry, I think, really helped, even though we weren't able to do some of the things that we normally do.
Jeremiah Johnson of Fox Sports Indiana joining us here on Unpaid Interns. I do want to talk a little bit about the bubble. Let's go general here with the NBA. What was your thought on the way the NBA handled it? It feels like overwhelming success from most of the people that are kind of talking about it. Your thoughts on the way the NBA put this all together?
So much uncertainty. How would this work? And I can even remember in June, you hear all the numbers, and the Florida, coronavirus cases were up, and was it going to be safe for people? It's not over at the time of this recording. It's 3-1 in the finals, but so I'll still knock on wood. No positive tests in 4 months is just remarkable. I wish I kind of knew what it was like in Orlando. All I really know is from talking to people. And what's crazy is the Pacers were eliminated in late August, and it's still going on. And it feels like that was, ages ago. And if the Pacers were winning, they would still be playing. We would still be working. And I know that was the goal for everyone. So it's one of those things where I think when a team's eliminated, they're disappointed, but maybe they're just also, appreciative of the fact that it actually happened. And so from a technical perspective, I guess what I can share is that they had a crew on scene doing what's called a world feed. And for the games, now they're national TV games, so it's a little bit different. For the games that we broadcast, there would be one feed that was sent to both the home or both broadcasts. And then we also had one camera where our director would have a direct line of communication with that one camera. So if they wanted special Pacers angle cutaways or shots, they could ask him, hey, give me Nate McMillan now. Like sometimes I'll do a story during a game on an assistant coach that the world feed is not going to be, giving us that angle. So then our director could ask that one camera person who's just working for our broadcast, zoom in on Dan Burke because we're getting ready to talk about him. So there were so many things that are easier to do when we have control of all of the cameras, not as easy when you don't. And that's where our producer and director and really our crew did a really good job of just making what we had available to us work. And like I said, do the best we could. And the other thing that was challenging, I think, from my perspective is the walk-off interview. It's the thing that I do probably each night after a win that gets the most attention. And I rely a lot on kind of that personal eye contact and getting a good vibe from the player. Because if you think about the Pacers team, you could go up and down the roster. You have a lot of different personalities. You have some that really like to talk, some that are really shy. And being there next to them can help that interview go, even if someone's not great on camera. And it was a little more challenging doing the walk-off interviews via a satellite hookup and a two-second delay from when I was asking questions and from when they would hear me. And it's harder in that format to have a good back and forth, or maybe if he says something, maybe me to interject really quickly. So that was one of the things that if we have to do this again, I think I could improve upon a little bit. But again, we weren't able to do those walk-off interviews in the playoffs because they didn't win, but we did have some during the regular season games. And I enjoyed 3 or 4 chances to get to talk to TJ Warren.
Let's talk Pacers bubble. I know it wasn't the brightest of moments there in the playoffs. Does anything change in your mind now that you see how well the Heat have played since the Pacers series, or is it still that sour taste? Like, man, they should have still hung around with them.
Yeah, if you're a person that's looking for silver linings or maybe but or excuses, I think you could look at that and say, well, the Pacers lost to the Heat. Well, everyone was losing to the Heat, and Miami was really healthy. That's the one thing about it that I would say that makes me, not feel as bad from a Pacers perspective is that they had all their players available and healthy. And when you don't have Domantas Sabonis and you don't have Jeremy Lamb, you knew that kind of going in, and you don't have Victor Oladipo at 100%. It is tough to beat a team that is A, playing well, and B, fully healthy. However, when you look at the last 2 years, the Pacers, were swept by the Celtics and swept by the Heat. And those are teams that eventually you're going to have to beat to get to where you want to go. And so I think that's the front office perspective is that, good regular season team. How can the Pacers be a team that not just gets to the playoffs, but makes some real noise in the postseason? And so, you can look at it however you want. You can say that Miami was just great and anybody that played them in the first round would have lost. That's possibility. But I'm a little kind of hungry for postseason success or to broadcast a winning playoff game. Haven't gotten a chance to do that for a few years now. Those are so memorable. I can remember everything about the 3 wins in that Cavs series from 2 or 3 years ago, and the last 2, the Celtics and the Heat series, not as memorable.
Well, let's talk positives. I mean, TJ Warren was incredible, especially during the 8 play-in games. What were your takeaways from his performance? Is that something you saw coming? Is that something that's maybe sustainable for years to come in Indy?
I think that you have that as a possibility that he is someone who can have a 40-point night, 53, what was it now against the 76ers, but you don't necessarily want to rely upon it. I thought that he was going to have a chance to have a bigger role, especially I can even remember driving to that first game, Pacers and Sixers, and finding out about an hour and a half before the game, or maybe just as I was arriving, that Malcolm Brogdon was not going to play, and you're already going to be playing your first game, without Sabonis. And I remember thinking, who's going to score? I think TJ Warren might have a chance to get a few shots up, and he did. So I do think that's something that you now know you have, you can count on, but I would say you don't want to rely on. And the other thing that I think is interesting, and it's for the front office and the new coaching staff to figure out, is he did a lot of that playing the 4. And he played a lot of 4 with the Suns, and he played a lot of 3 during the season with the Pacers because of their big lineup. So you have versatility. I think that's one thing every team wants is they want, lineup versatility and to be able to have matchups that you can mix and match. So maybe he's more suited for a 4, and maybe if you bring in someone, maybe it's a 3. This is all hypothetical, and just I'm sure that there are dry erase boards up at the St. Vincent Center where options, plan A, plan B. But I think that the good news is TJ Warren is a big part of the future plans, and they have him under contract for the next 2 years as well.
I think it got talked about a lot, but the fact that he wasn't there, but maybe the impact wasn't talked about enough. What was the impact of not having Domantas Sabonis for this Indiana offense?
Yeah, I mean, that's where, I have a lot of respect for the coaching staff and what they were able to do over the last few years, especially the last 2 with all of the injuries. And so much of what they did offensively when they went into a game was built around starting the offense with Sabonis, and whether he set a high pick and roll or whether, he went out of the game early and came in and basically helped lead a second unit that was an advantage for the Pacers most nights. And so for them they had some time, basically when they got to Orlando, they had a pretty good idea that he was not going to play. So they had a week and a half to figure out how they were going to play without him. And to be 6-2 in those games, and to have even, Malcolm wasn't 100% maybe in some of those games, and Victor missed 1 or 2. I'll give the coaching staff a lot of credit. And then the problem is you can't go into a playoff series against an elite team where there are so many, scouting, not necessarily mismatches, but strategy sessions from the other team. I mean, basically teams had months to prepare for the Pacers, just like the Pacers had for them. But you knew they were planning to figure out a way to slow down Sabonis. And when you take him out, I think they found some weaknesses in the Pacers lineup. So it was tough because the offense is so reliant upon him. Rebounding is such a big part of what Sabonis does and helps the Pacers. And he was their all-star. So if you take, quote unquote, the best player or the all-star off of any team, and you go into a playoff series that is perceived to be an evenly matched series, it's going to put you at a disadvantage, and it did hurt the Pacers.
Jeremiah Johnson of Fox Sports Indiana joining us here on Unpaid Interns. We mentioned the Heat. They're in the finals now. They're down 3-1. LeBron's going for his 4th ring. You've covered many games with the Pacers taking on LeBron, many of those Cavs series. I mean, what is it? What is so impressive about his game that has allowed him to win everywhere? And what does a 4th ring do for his legacy in your mind?
I kind of feel like his legacy is already set. I kind of get tired a little bit of the, Jordan, LeBron James comparisons, because at this point, sure, if he wins this one or he wins another one and he gets to 4, gets to 5, you could then start to just compare the championships. But as impressive as anything to me is, the number of consecutive years that he went to the Eastern Conference Finals, and then just that one-off year with the Lakers last year, and then now he's back, and how he has basically made stars out of average players. And so if you're on a team, if you were on those Bulls teams and you played with Michael Jordan, you're going to be more well-known and recognized than the average 6th or 7th man of the Denver Nuggets from that era. So, if you're on those teams, you're going to be, getting more recognition. But I think he's tended to just lift the play of those around him so much. And he just has that, every situation, that winning attitude. Does he win every game? No. And, you could argue sometimes with the methods. Sometimes I'm not as big a fan of the social media posts, or also the way that sometimes he tries to put his pressure on the officiating. But let's be honest, that's probably been done for as long as there's been basketball. I mean, you want to try to get the best calls that you can. I think it's a little bit overdone right now. It's one thing that I wish they could kind of rein in a little bit, but you can't argue with the results. And he's done it, 3 different places now. And probably the thing that he did that I was most impressed with was after leaving Cleveland, going to Miami, going back to Cleveland, and winning that championship, despite maybe some hard feelings with ownership. That one, I think once he did that, I think his place and legacy was pretty much set, and the rest is kind of icing on the cake.
Let's transition into your media career. You're a sideline reporter, pregame host now here with the Pacers. Kind of, what was the journey like to get to that point for you?
Just work hard, try to learn from all of your experiences and be ready to take advantage of an opportunity when it comes. I graduated from Ball State, and my first TV job was, after 3 months of just trying to find an opportunity, probably sending 75 to 100 VHS tapes out via UPS mail. My mom used to drop them off at the post office every day. And every time I saw that, well, that's $5 that I'm probably wasting, got an opportunity and had a job in Hazard, Kentucky as a sportscaster, and a great place to learn and to get experience. And I was only there for about a year and a half. And then an opportunity came open in Terre Haute that I'd also had an interview with previously. So I had a connection. I obviously always wanted to be back closer to home. So it just kind of worked out perfectly. I think the one thing that happened in Terre Haute that was really good for me was it kind of got me back to Indiana, and it established some broadcasting roots in the state where, if you asked me when I graduated college, I wasn't someone that said I wanted to work for ESPN. My goals were actually to be a sports director in Indianapolis. I wanted to be an Indiana broadcaster. And so for me, being at the Pacers is kind of the ultimate dream. But when I was in Terre Haute, Colts training camp was always at Rose-Hulman. So I viewed that as a great opportunity when the sportscasters that I looked up to would come over to Terre Haute for Colts training camp, and I was there working alongside them. While I wasn't necessarily trying to get a job from them, it got me known a little bit from some of them. And you never know which relationship that you make could end up helping. And also when I was in Terre Haute, I was on the Indiana State Sycamores broadcast network, and I was a sideline reporter for the Sycamores, and I hosted their coaches show on television. So those experiences really helped me to when I got a job in Indianapolis. Then I was in a good position to also, when I had time, granted, there's not as much time when you're working full-time for a TV station, to do some sideline reporting. And I worked on the IHSA Champions Network, or championship broadcasts. And so I had that resume tape, and I had that experience, and things kind of just fell into place perfectly. And really, honestly, one of the relationships that I made working alongside Chris Denary really helped me with the opportunity with the Pacers. So basically, just work hard. You can't always be worried about the early jobs that you get, the amount of money that you're going to make, or maybe even where you're living. I was someone who just wanted to make sure that I had a job I enjoyed and never felt like it was work. And knock on wood, 20 years later, I still feel that way.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And now you have a job, like you said, with the Pacers, which is absolutely incredible. What's your advice to young aspiring sideline reporters, or people who want to do what you do? Kind of what are some of your pieces of advice you would give to them?
Well, the first thing is, while I said that this is the dream job, the actual goal was to be a sports director in Indianapolis. And you could argue, well, there are only 3 or 4 of those, so that's a pretty lofty goal. It's also tough to say, my dream is to be an NBA sideline reporter, because there are only 30 of those across the whole country. So I fully admit that while a lot of people would kill to have the job that I have, you could be successful and still not get that job. So that'd probably be the one thing that I would say, is that have those goals and aspirations, but don't consider maybe that the be all end all, and if you enjoy this job and this profession, enjoy wherever you're at and whatever you're doing. And I guess I'd go back to, I can remember working in Terre Haute, and regional Saturday used to be like my favorite day of the year, because it would start at 8 a.m. and I'd be driving to Washington and Lagodi, and I'd shoot highlights of 4 games. I'd go to one, go to another site, come back, try to get another one on the way back. And that was just in the morning. And then it'd prepare the 6 o'clock sportscast, and then get ready to go for wherever I was going to go for an 8 o'clock championship game. I could be in Vincennes, and then I could go up to Vermilion County for the championships. That being said, that was my favorite day. And at the end of that day, it was probably a 15 to 16 hour day, but I enjoyed it. And so that passion that you put in those jobs that you get when you're, coming out of college and trying to get your career started, keep that passion for the job and carry that over when you get the bigger opportunities. I'm still passionate about, obviously passionate about the job that I have now, but that enthusiasm Don't treat any work as if it's work. Treat it like I get the opportunity to go do this. And then for specifically those that have sideline reporting aspirations, I think what's available now with the podcasting, what you're doing right now, every time that you are actually quote unquote broadcasting or have a microphone in front of you is a chance to get better and to get more comfortable. Technically I started in high school, and while I played sports in high school, we had a local public access channel and we did a weekly sports show, and there was no teleprompter. We basically would come up with our format and our scripts, and we talked, and that's really where I got comfortable talking in front of a microphone. And so the main thing is, I can remember the first job in Hazard. I go back and look at those tapes now and how nervous I was. But at some point, eventually, you're not nervous talking. And that is probably the biggest skill. And the presentation of a sideline reporter is you need to be conversational. You need to be confident. And that's only happens through repetition. So I do think that the podcast's format, while it's great for those that are watching and you're entertaining them, you're getting experience talking and asking questions, and things like that can really help when you get that opportunity. Maybe whether it's, hey, the IHSA needs a sideline reporter for the volleyball state finals. That experience that you have hosting a podcast could help you and make you seem comfortable when you're doing that job.
Well, now you've got me wishing I was still working with high school basketball in the regional days. Those are great. What makes Indiana high school basketball so special in your mind?
Well, I mean, everybody has their own story, and I grew up as a son of a coach, and I grew up in the single class era and was someone who was nostalgic about, the Milan story, but not just Milan, but in any sectional, always kind of pulling for the team that was the smaller school against the big school. And so I guess that I get it naturally just from where I grew up. And for those that have grown up recently, it's changed a little bit. Some of it depends on where you are. And when I mentioned Terre Haute, some of those pockets, the southern part of the state, it's every bit as big of a deal now as it was. Sometimes the sectionals now, geography, it plays a part, and you may play someone that's not as much of a rival, and the gym may not be as filled up. I'm a little bit disappointed by that, but all you have to do is just look back at the history. And how about this? The fact that Indiana has a Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame, pretty much devoted to high school basketball, and to some extent those that have played in college and pros in Indiana, but it's pretty much a high school basketball shrine. You don't have that anywhere else in the country. And so I love state championship day, but as you mentioned, I think the regional Saturday is almost my favorite one. And I guess we could go full circle. I feel so bad for those boys. The girls were able to finish their tournament in 2020. Boys sectional champions, 64 sectional champions. They were not able to have a regional championship, and they were not able to finish their state tournament. And that's something that, I think when those kids that won a sectional are in their 40s and 50s, they're going to probably always have that, what if we would have won the state that year? What if we would have won the regional? And it's just another example of why 2020 is going to go down as one of the worst years ever.
Yeah, that was I was fortunate to get 4 regional days in my 4 years, and those days are absolutely incredible. But I completely agree with you. I wish I had gotten to see the one class tournaments. I think that would have been really cool. The 4 class is great, but I agree. I think the 1 class, I never got to see it, but that would have been fun. I want to go back quickly before we wrap up. You're on the sideline. Let's say there's a coach, you're not, the game's not going well. The coach it looks like the last thing he wants to do is talk to a sideline reporter. How do you handle those interviews where the game's not going well? They're down by 20 or something, but you have to fulfill your job and you still have to go talk to them. How do you try and handle those situations?
Well, I think when you're with the team and you're interviewing them and seeing them on a daily basis, they understand that I have a job to do, but that I'm also going to be fair and not personally attacking, maybe to where they're the columnist at the paper or someone who isn't affiliated with the team, maybe has a little bit more leeway to be attacking. I have a unique balance because I'm a Pacers employee technically, but I'm working for Fox Sports Indiana during these broadcasts. And so, I'm not going to sit there and be overly critical, but I can't sugarcoat as well. So I think the main thing is don't when things aren't going well, your questions should be a little bit more to the point, and don't act like you know the answer to the question, or don't be as leading. Get the question out there and let them, say what they want to say and respond. They know it's not going well, so they don't expect you to say, "Oh, you're doing great, coach. You're only down 20." Like that doesn't do any good either. You're down by 20. What adjustments did you make? What did you see specifically from the way the Heat were able to attack you in the paint? And for our broadcasts, we don't do those walk-off or those post-game interviews per se after losses, because I'm actually the one that's hosting the post-game show. So, the coach will be doing a press conference always after a game, and players in the locker room. Good news is my role is usually interviews when things are going well, but I always do interview the assistant coach at halftime. And there are many times when it was not a good first half. And sometimes those are some of the best interviews, especially if you watched any of Dan Burke over the years. We have some Dan Burke TV moments.
We lost Jeremiah there in the middle of his answer, talking about Dan Burks and his television personality as the assistant coach of the Indiana Pacers. Hopefully we can get Jeremiah back and connected before we officially have to go. There he is, coming back here. Lost him for a second, but
there we are.
That's live TV for us.
That's live
right?
YouTube, right? Yeah. I didn't know if the Zoom session ran out.
No, you're good. The last question I have before I officially let you go. You talked about that Cavs series where you remember those games and what a great series that was. What are some of the Pacers moments that I don't want to say you have to pinch yourself that you got to be there, but just some special memories that you have while working there?
That series does stand out. I mentioned it and then you re-brought it up. The Bojan Bogdanovic game 3 in that series was one where he couldn't miss. The field house was electric. That gave the Pacers a 2-1 lead, and you had real hope and thought that the Pacers could win that series. And probably the other one in that same series was frustrating, disappointing, insert your adjective, but LeBron James hitting a three-pointer at the top of the key to win Game 5 after Victor Oladipo was goaltended and they didn't call it. That gave the Cavs a 3-2 lead. And I'll never forget being right there when that shot went in, and then walking on the court and in 90 seconds having to compose my thoughts for what I would say to start that post-game show. Because it was almost one of those I don't believe what I just saw kind of things, but you don't want to steal a line from another broadcaster. But now that it's in the past, I can say it was pretty cool that I was there that night and saw that, and the Pacers were on the other end of it. But it was one of those moments. I didn't appreciate jumping on the scorer's table basically right over my shoulder as I was hosting the post-game show. Another one that was also not a Pacers win, but we were there for Klay Thompson scoring those 60 points in 29 minutes. And it's probably the only time, I think, in the 6 or 7 years I've had this job where we requested and got an interview, a walk-off interview with someone on the other team. And the Warriors PR staff was so good. They came by in the fourth quarter. Was like, "Can we do anything for you?" And I said, "Well, if we could interview Klay, that'd be awesome." Knowing that probably the answer is no, because, the way it normally works is if you want an opposing team's player, you get the third or fourth choice because the home team TV, home team radio. Sometimes there's the home team website gets their picks, and usually the player only has time for one. But to their credit, their PR staff knew it was one of these, truly memorable moments. And he said, "I can get him for you for 2 questions. You'll be after our radio, if that's all right." I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I was like, "Yeah, that was awesome." And Klay, obviously it wasn't a great night from a Pacers fan perspective, but it was a night that many NBA fans will never forget. So that stands out as well. And then I guess I would even go back to when I worked at Fox 59, I covered many of those Pacers Heat playoff games before I got this job from a different perspective. But it kind of was one of those pinch me moments, because when I got into this business, my goal was to go cover a team in the NCAA tournament. And so even before that, I would say maybe my best moments were covering those Butler teams in the Final Four. I was at all those games, and that was awesome. I don't know that I'll ever do anything, as cool as that is, to be at every game, first round, second round, Sweet 16, Final Four for 2 straight years and getting close to those players. So I've had a lot of moments that are great, couple of, 3 Super Bowls that I've been able to cover, but with the Pacers, those matchups with LeBron, and then even anytime you win against LeBron, it feels pretty good. And so even a regular season game this past December at Bankers Life Fieldhouse when the Pacers beat the Lakers, that's one of those nights where you finish your job, you leave work, you drive home, and you kind of have a smile on your face because you're like, I got to be a part of that. That was cool.
Well, that is an exceptional list of great moments you got to be a part of. Thanks so much for being a part of the podcast today. Appreciate you joining me and sharing some of your insight. Best of luck to you in off season number 2.
Austin, happy to do it, and keep up the good work. And shout out to all the unpaid interns out there.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Jeremiah. Have a great off season number 2. Looking forward to the Pacers season whenever it kicks off.
We'll be ready whenever the time comes, and I promise by then I'll shave and be ready to go on TV.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jeremiah. Have a good one.
All right, take care.
That's Jeremiah Johnson of Fox Sports Indiana joining us here on Unpaid Interns. So glad to have him here on the episode today. A reminder, you can catch all of our previous episodes on the IU Sports Media YouTube page or wherever you get your podcast under Unpaid Interns. We'll be back on Monday for another episode, but for now, we'll wrap things up. Have a great weekend, everyone out there listening. For Jeremiah Johnson, I'm Austin Render saying so long from Unpaid Interns.